When I look at biblical DNA, the DNA said, you are the Father.
All right, biblical DNA here, and I want to continue on with this ancient Egyptian sample. Now, I brought up this article the last time, and I brought up another article that I would like to read the whole thing, and there's two more, one from National Geographic. This one is first human genome from ancient Egypt, sequenced from 4,800-year-old teeth, 40 years after the first effort to extract mummy DNA. Researchers have finally generated a full genome sequence from an ancient Egyptian by Ewen Callaway. The ancient Egyptian Old Kingdom, 2686 to 2125 BC, produced many lasting artifacts, but little DNA has survived. Teeth from an elderly man who lived around the time that the earliest pyramids were built have yielded the first full human genome sequence from ancient Egypt. The remains are 4,800 to 4,500 years old, overlapping with a period in Egyptian history known as the Old Kingdom or the Age of the Pyramids. They harbored signs of ancestry similar to that of other ancient North Africans, as well as the people from the Middle East, researchers report today in Nature. It's incredibly exciting and important, says David Reich, a population geneticist at Harvard Medical School in Boston, Massachusetts, who was not involved in the study. We always hoped we would get our first ancient DNA from mummies. Numerous labs have tried to extract DNA from ancient Egyptian remains. In 1985, evolutionary geneticist Svante Pabo reported the first ancient DNA sequences from any human. Several thousand DNA letters from a 2,400-year-old Egyptian mummy of a child. But Pabo, who won a Nobel Prize in 2022 for other work, later realized that the sequences were contaminated with modern DNA. Let me go ahead and read that back to you again. But Pabo, who won a Nobel Prize in 2022 for other work, later realized that the sequences were contaminated with modern DNA, possibly his own. Now, so you see the time span. So this was back in 1985, and so in 2017, or later on with newer technology in he realized that the DNA he sequenced was contaminated. Now, see, when they resequenced those royal mummies from Egypt, I wonder if they're going to get the same situation. That's something to look out for when that study drops. A 2017 study generated limited genome data from 3 Egyptian mummies that lived between 3,600 and 2,000 years ago. The hot North African climate speeds up the breakdown of DNA, and the mummification process might also accelerate it, said Pontus Skoglund, a paleogeneticist at the Francis Crick Institute who co-led the nature study. At a press briefing, mummified individuals are probably not a great way to preserve DNA. Oh, let me read that again for you. Mummified individuals are probably not a great way to preserve DNA. Let me read it again for you. Mummified individuals are probably not a great way to preserve DNA. Ooh, so when they did those royal mummies, did they also encounter the same situation? I don't know. We're going to have to wait and see. The remains that Skoglund's team sequenced predate widespread mummification. The person was entered instead in a ceramic pot, a sign of high but not elite status. The remains were found at an archaeological site called Nuwayrat, 625 kilometers south of Cairo along the Nile River. The teeth and bones were discovered in 1902 when Egypt was under British colonial rule. They were donated to institutions in Liverpool, UK, where they have been ever since, even surviving German bombing during the Second World War. So, yeah, so if I'm not mistaken, this is actually part of the museum in Britain. Low expectations. Skoglund says his expectations were low when his team extracted DNA from several teeth from Nuwayrat individual, but 2 samples contain enough authentic ancient DNA to generate a full genome sequence. Y chromosome sequences indicated that the remains belonged to a male. The majority of his DNA resembled that of early farmers from the Neolithic period of North Africa around 6,000 years ago. The rest most closely match people in Mesopotamia, a historical Middle Eastern region that was home to the ancient Sumerian civilization and was where some of the first writing systems emerged. It's not clear whether this implies a genetic direct link between members of Mesopotamian cultures and people in ancient Egypt, also hinted at by similarities in some cultural artifacts, or if the man's Mesopotamian ancestry arrived through other unsampled populations, the researchers say. The rest of the ancient Egyptian man's bones reveal more details about his life. Evidence of arthritis and osteoporosis suggests he died at an advanced age for the time, possibly in his 60s. Other signs of wear indicate a life of physical toil, sitting hunched over on hard surfaces. On the basis of this and imagery from other tombs from this period, he might have been a potter, said co-author Joel Irish, a bioarchaeologist at Liverpool John Moores University, at the press briefing. The publication of a whole genome data set of an ancient Egyptian constitutes a significant achievement in the field of molecular Egyptology, says Yehagad, a geneticist at Egypt's National Research Center in Cairo, who praises the researchers for presenting the provenance of the remains clearly. But he points out that the genome is from one individual and might not fully represent ancient Egypt's gene pool. which was probably a melting pot of different ancestries. For this reason, researchers are eager for more ancient Egyptian genome data, perhaps even from a mummy. Advances in ancient genomics technology and local capacity, GAD supervises an ancient DNA lab at the National Museum of Egyptian Civilization in Cairo, means it hopefully won't take another 40 years. Mm, 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 mm. Let's see how we doing on this. It's not showing that I'm streaming, but I'm assuming I am streaming. This is weird. If I'm not streaming, it is what it is. I'll stream again. This happened to me last time too. So for those that watched the first one, that's what happened. My first one is that I realized it wasn't showing that I was streaming, and so I had to stream again. But it looks like I am streaming, so it's all good. All good, all good. So let's go. DNA shows ancient Egyptians had surprising foreign roots. Scientists have sequenced the oldest known DNA from ancient Egypt. It belonged to a potter who lived 4,500 years ago. This rare genetic snapshot offers new insights into diverse ancestry of early Egyptians. Ancient Egypt went through a period of major change between 4,500 to 4,800 years ago. The country's early dynastic period was transitioning into the Old Kingdom period. This saw advances that allowed expert builders in Cairo to construct what would become the Great Pyramid of Giza. It also saw mature hieroglyphic writing and the emergence of the pottery wheel. South of Cairo, in a village called Nuwayrat, one man lived a hard life as a potter, even with the new technology. But fortunately, when he died, his body was placed in a ceramic pot and buried in a tomb cut into a hillside, allowing UK-based researchers to analyze his remains genetically. Which again, this sample was taken some years back, and it's been in UK for a long time. Their study, published in the journal Nature, describes the first whole ancient Egyptian genome and the oldest DNA sample from Egypt to date. This individual lived and died during a critical period of change in ancient Egypt, said Lunas Gerland Flink, a biomolecular archaeologist at the University of Aberdeen in the UK and co-senior author on the study. Flink and colleagues have revealed how the potter lived and died and his genetic ancestry. They know he stood 1.6 meters, which is 2 feet tall, had brown eyes and brown hair, and lived to be as old as 64 years. We've been able to tell part of the individual's story, finding that some of his ancestry came from the Fertile Crescent, highlighting a mixing of groups from North Africa and the Middle East. At this time, said Gerland Flink, the Fertile Crescent was where the first agricultural communities of the Middle East and Mediterranean basin are thought to have settled. It was a crescent-shaped region that spanned modern-day Syria, southeastern Turkey, and Iraq. While it is difficult to draw broad conclusions from a single individual, this groundbreaking article provides a first glimpse into the genetics of early Egypt, a region that has been long been a critical gap in the ancient DNA map, said Isaac Lazarus, a geneticist at Harvard University in the US, who was not involved in the study. Life of an ancient Egyptian potter was hard. The researchers first analyzed the man's skeleton with a variety of techniques to find clues about his life. Using radiocarbon dating, they confirmed he lived at some point between 2855 to 2570 BC, a time overlapping the early dynastic and Old Kingdom periods. They ran a chemical analysis of the man's teeth to learn about his diet. The results suggested the individual had likely grown up in Egypt. So he was not a foreigner. I just want to make that clear. Let me read that again. They ran a chemical analysis of the man's teeth to learn about his diet. The results suggested the individual had likely grown up in Egypt. The markings on the skeleton itself gave clues that he could have worked as a potter. His seat bones were expanded in size. His arms showed evidence of extensive movement back and forth, and there's substantial arthritis only in his right foot. Though circumstantial, these clues point towards pottery, including use of a pottery wheel, which arrived in Egypt around the same time, said Joel Irish, an archaeologist at Liverpool John Moores University, UK, and co-author of the study. But his higher class burial was unusual for a potter of that time. Perhaps he was exponentially skilled or successful to advance his social status, Iris said. Genetic history of ancient Egypt now feasible. Scientists have sequenced the DNA of Egyptian mummies before, but these individuals lived during the late intermediate period after 1400 BC. The potter is thought to be at least 1,000 years older. We had no ancient Egyptian DNA. This study is a completely new genetic analysis of someone from the Old Kingdom, said Harold Ringbanger, a population geneticist at the Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology in Leipzig, Germany, who was not involved in the study. A major problem with previous attempts was that samples were mummified, which contaminates DNA. Let's go ahead and read that again. A major problem with previous attempts was that samples were mummified, which contaminates DNA. This is the second article that I read from the original study that is stating that mummification contaminates the DNA. So all of those royal DNA samples, what's going to happen when they resequence those samples and they find out a lot of its contamination? What happens then? I appreciate it, man. I hope you're doing well too. Where are you at, if I may ask? Here, with a normal burial, the DNA was well preserved. This makes it special, Ringbar told DW. Extracting DNA from the man's tooth, the researchers sequenced the man's whole genome. Analysis showed that 80% of his ancestry was related to ancient individuals who lived in North Africa. The remaining 20% of his ancestry was traced to people who lived in the Fertile Crescent, particularly Mesopotamia. It's a big open question when people with Levantine ancestry who brought farming from the Fertile Crescent came to Egypt. The authors speculate the Levantine ancestry came relatively late, so this study is the first major step to answering this question, said Ringbaugh. Okay. Genetic evidence suggests that people moved into Egypt and mixed with local populations at this time was previously only visible in archaeological findings, but researchers lack diversity in genome sequencing, and Ringbaugh said that was still a problem. We don't have any ancient DNA to compare this sample to, so we don't know how much of their ancestry is local, said Ringbauer. The authors say their study shows it's possible to provide strong genetic evidence of the movements of people in Egypt during the Bronze Age. Lazarus agreed the study marked an advance in recovering DNA from ancient Egyptians. For the first time, the genetic history of ancient Egypt can truly begin to be written, he said. In future work, the research team hopes to build a bigger picture of migration and ancestry in collaboration with Egyptian researchers, edited by Zulfikar Abani. Real quick, I want to go over the DNA, the Y DNA of the individual. I saw the last video; it was kind of cut off, so I want to make sure people actually get a clear view of where he was placed on the Y fold, and I will also bring up the migration on family tree DNA and discovery. So the Nuwayrat sample ID is NUE001, and we can see the individuals right here. He is under the S&P of E-Y222180. Right, and we can see what down subclades he comes from EM35, from EM30 to M35 to Z827, Z830, CTS 10880, Y139640, Y139639, Y141317, Y141495. Now, also his mtDNA is also on here, which is there's another ancient Egyptian sample, by the way, that I realized that was found too. So there we go. I think this is from the 2017 study, if I'm not mistaken. Yep, I believe so. So there you go. That's the mtDNA. So the I9, I don't know where exactly they're getting the N1. I think in the paper, they kind of did it reverse. I would have done the I9 and then the, like, we call it the greater than symbol. I would have used that and then put you know, I don't know, they did it opposite. I would have put the 21A, then the greater than symbol, and then the I9, but you know, it is what it is. All right, so this is the migration map. Let me make sure we get a clear view of this before I decide to move on. Yeah, it looks pretty good. Let me see if I can zoom out just a tad bit so we can see the migration completely. I think that's gonna do it. That looks good, y'all. Okay, let's start it. So it's interesting to note that this mutation went back. So it went through Saudi Arabia and then bounced back into the Levant, where the Natufian culture would have been located, and the Levant pre-pottery Neolithic B culture would have been located. So that's very interesting, that it basically bounced back to its ancestral land. And it just went all over the place, bouncing from the Levant to Anatolia, to Iraq, to Saudi Arabia. And see, their expansion is heading towards the east, to Bahrain and Qatar. So that's how interesting. But this sample would have also would have drifted to the Northeast Africa. So that's something Family Tree DNA has to update. Definitely have to update that. All right, so Family Tree DNA has him under E-FT, or yeah, E-FT 389071. All right, and here's the mtDNA of the origin of where it would have been located. The first mutation of I was located in Ukraine. All right, and this is the sample right here with the mtDNA. They have them as I9 in Family Tree DNA. And as you can see, it also labels his Y DNA. Right? All right. I'm going to do this paper first. I want to do this paper first because I quoted it in my post, and I want to make sure that people get a full retrospect of why I posted the colorized version of this picture, and I let AI make it realistic. A lot of people got in their feelings about the picture, but when you look at this individual, you don't see a sub-Saharan African. You don't see a Horner African. You see somebody typically from Southwest Asia, the Near East, North Africa. That's what you see. You don't see somebody from Nigeria. You don't see somebody from the Congo. You don't see somebody from Cameroon, Benin to go. No, you don't see somebody from Somalia, Ethiopia, Eritrea. You don't see that. You don't even see somebody like this from South Sudan. This is phenotypically North African or Southwest Asian. That's what you see. Some people can even say, yes, he looks like a Mesopotamian. He looks like a farmer from Mesopotamia. He don't look that. This don't look like somebody from Sub-Saharan Africa. So, and the reason why I mentioned that, because the archaeologist, I think it's forensic archaeologist, if I'm not mistaken, Wilkinson, she mentions of why they didn't give it pigmentation color, which to me, you didn't have to. I can see grayscale of what this individual looks like. And for those saying, oh, but he has a protruding jawline, he has a chin, he has lips. So do Sicilians. So do a lot of Jews. Yep, a lot of Jews have lips also. They have lips in the jaw. I don't know where people think that some of us have to be jawless, and that means if we have a jaw, we have Sub-Saharan African. I mean, I have Sub-Saharan African in me, 5%. I have a jawline. I also have lips. So, but you don't have to have a huge amount of Sub-Saharan African in you to have a phenotype. Oh, you have to be a Sub-Saharan African. No. You don't. And I guarantee there's people out there that really has no admixture really showing Sub-Saharan African countries in their DNA, their autosomal, and they have lips. So I don't know. People gotta get out of that mindset of you gotta have, if you have lips or a jawline, you're somehow associated with Sub-Saharan Africans. It's not true. And for those that think it do, oh, prove it. I really prove it, because you really don't have to. You don't have to have recent ancestry coming from Sub-Saharan African countries or ancestry that comes from the diaspora of Africa really showing lips. Like people that have lips, I don't know where people get that concept from. It's just, to me, it's just pseudo. It's very pseudoscience. This ancient Egyptian left behind 4,500-year-old DNA. It was used to recreate his face. Scientists have for the first time sequenced the most complete and oldest ancient Egyptian genome ever found, unlocking new secrets from the Old Kingdom. By Nicholas St. Clair. Let me see how it is looking. I want to make sure this is big enough so y'all can be following along. I think y'all can read that. Yeah, that looks good. Yeah, perfect. All right. Sealed in a ceramic funerary pot, knees curled to his chin, the Egyptian skeleton lay undisturbed for thousands of years. In 1902, British archaeologists excavated him from his tomb, carved into a limestone hillside in the Nuwayrat necropolis, more than 150 miles south of Cairo. While the pharaohs of his time built a colossal monuments like the Great Pyramid of Giza, this man, likely a potter who lived 4,500 to 4,800 years ago, left behind a different kind of legacy. His exponentially well-preserved DNA. Somehow, his remains endured centuries of scorching Egyptian heat and even Nazi bombings while housed in Liverpool, England during World War II. Now scientists have sequenced the first whole genome of an ancient Egyptian from intact DNA extracted from his teeth. The study published Wednesday in Nature describes the oldest Egyptian DNA ever recovered, radiocarbon dated to between 2,855 and 2,570 BC. This was during the end of the early dynastic and the beginning of the Old Kingdom period, when Egypt's rulers consolidated power and ushered in the age of the pyramids. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of ancient genomes from across the world, says Linus Gerdelan Flink, a biomolecular archaeologist at the University of Aberdeen in Scotland and a co-corresponding author of the paper. To date, scientists have collected ancient DNA from Neanderthals, Denisovans, and Homo sapiens from 45,000 years ago. Yet Egypt has remained a kind of white spot on the map of this big puzzle of human genetic ancestry. But we remember, y'all, we have all those mummies, those royal mummies we have, but it's been a white spot on the map with this big puzzle of human genetic ancestry. It's crazy. Previously, the oldest DNA recovered from ancient Egypt came from 3 mummies buried at the Absir el Melech necropolis and dated between 787 and 23 BC. But those sequences only represented partial genomes. The new genome is complete and comes from an individual who lived some 1,500 years earlier. All right, so pottery coffin and archaeological remains of Nuwayrat individual as discovered in 1902. Photograph courtesy of Garstang Museum, University of Liverpool. I knew it was in a museum. This genome allows us for the first time to get insights into the genetic ancestry of an ancient Egyptian individual from the Old Kingdom period. Adeline Moretz Jacobs, a biological anthropologist who conducted the research while pursuing her doctoral degree at the Liverpool John Moores University, said during a press briefing. It also allowed for scientists to partially reconstruct what the person's face might have looked like. Daniel Antone, head of the Department of Egypt and Sudan at the British Museum in London, who peer-reviewed the paper, praised the work. Although this is based on one individual, the finding is highly significant as ancient DNA rarely survives in the Nile Valley, he says. With it, scientists can start to unravel genetic clues to how different populations of people interacted in ancient Egypt. Ancient Egypt ancestry revealed. With the DNA sequence, scientists can start to ask questions about this ancient individual, starting with a basic one. Who were his ancestors? While this is the lineage of just one person, it could help historians understand how people migrated and mixed in ancient Egypt. About 80% of the man's ancestry traces back to Neolithic populations in North Africa. The remaining 20% is linked to ancient peoples from West Asia, including Mesopotamia and the Eastern Fertile Crescent, which encompass present-day Iraq, Western Iran, parts of Syria, and the extreme southeast of Turkey. Moretz Jacob says they did not find evidence of East African or Sub-Saharan African ancestry in the Nuwayrat individual. I'm going to say that again. They did not find evidence of East African or Sub-Saharan African ancestry in the Nuwayrat individual. Just so we're clear. All right, pottery vessel in which the Nuwayrat individual was discovered, rock-cut tombs at Nuwayrat, enclosing the pottery vessel containing the pottery coffin burial. The researchers don't know when in the Nuwayrat man's lineage these two populations mixed, but say it likely occurred over hundreds or even thousands of years in the man's ancestry, and maybe multiple times. This genetic data aligns with archaeological evidence, suggesting that in addition to trading goods like crops, animals, and culture like writing systems and pottery in the pottery wheel, people themselves were moving and intermingling between regions. Got him. The DNA constitutes a significant milestone in the field of ancient Egyptian genomics, says Yeha Gad, a scientific supervisor of the Ancient DNA Lab at the National Museum of Egyptian Civilization in Cairo, who was not involved in the study. He says the new finding reinforces the status of ancient Egypt as a hub and melting pot of the old world. The next step for the team, says Gerland Flink, is to collaborate with Egyptian scientists to further decipher Egypt's past. Gad, who helps lead Egypt's National Genome Project, which aims to sequence the genomes of 100,000 Egyptian adults and 200 ancient Egyptian mummies. How many, y'all? 200 ancient Egyptian mummies. Says he welcomes the idea. We can all serve and work together to draw a better picture of this fascinating ancient civilization. which constitutes an important stage in the journey of humanity, he says. Facial reconstruction and potential controversy. In addition to sequencing the Nuwayrat man's genome, the researchers also unveiled a facial reconstruction made by forensic anthropologist Caroline Wilkinson. Wilkinson, who leads the face lab at Liverpool John Moores University, previously recreated the faces of figures like Ramses II and Cleopatra's sister Arsinoe IV. Starting with a 3D scan of this skull, she constructed his facial features like the jawline, nose, and eyes, body parts that are relatively easy to predict from bone structure alone, she says. The ears and mouth, by contrast, are more difficult. Genetic analysis suggested the man likely had brown eyes, brown hair, and skin pigmentation ranging from dark to black skin, based on predictions from a tool called the Hierasis Plex S system. But the authors caution that these predictions come with some uncertainty given the limited genetic data from comparable ancient populations. I'm going to read that again, y'all. But the authors caution that these predictions come with some uncertainty given the limited genetic data from comparable ancient populations. To avoid speculation about features they could not definitively determine, Wilkinson says she and her team rendered the reconstruction in grayscale without hair or skin tone. She added that she expects the image to spark some controversy as part or past depictions of other ancient Egyptians have. They are often criticized for appearing too European or too African, she says. Yes, because they were too Southwest Asian. They were too similar to North Africans. They were too similar to Iberian Marusian, going to Natufian culture, going to the Levant pre-Potter Neolithic B culture. They were those people from Southwest Asia, North Africa. All right, so using a 3D scan, forensic anthropologists rebuilt the face of the Nuwayrat man from an analysis of his skull. Now, I'm going to stop it right there and go to something real quick if I have it still open, right? So this is something that I did as soon as I read this post. I said, okay, I'll do it. They don't want to do it, I'll do it. I'll take the heat. I got no problem. I'm citing the source. I have the ability to do so. Fair use. Section 107 of the Copyright Act provides the statutory framework for determining whether something is a fair use and identifies certain types of uses. I'm using this as research and scholarship, right? So that's the picture, the grayscale picture that they use. I put it into Gemini, colorize picture, and make it realistic. That's the result it gave me. I didn't put anything else, make it into a white man, or make it into a European, or make it into a North African, or make it into a freaking Asiatic. Nope. I just said colorize picture and make it realistic. These people that comment, they have some weird fantasies and fetishes and stuff like that about an obsession with Europeans. You need to stop. Stop it. Just completely stop it. You can take that color out, and this man looks nothing like a sub-Saharan African. Nothing like a sub-Saharan guy. Don't look nothing like sub-Saharan Africans. Why? Because his genome says so. His genetics states that he has no affinities with East Africans or Sub-Saharan Africans. Got to clear that up because I received I think it was 30 comments from the same individual at like 3 o'clock in the morning. It was ridiculous. I'm like, what in the world is this person on? And they just kept on giving me AI after AI after AI after AI and after AI. I just had to block them. I had to just completely block the person. All right, so for this one, just to be fair, I colorize it by making the skin pigmentation similar to ancient Egyptians. Eyes brown, hair brown, skin dark to black, with a lower probability of intermediate skin pigmentation. What were the results? There you go. That's the results. Everyone, and I mean this, everyone. I don't care what your ethnicity, where your origins take you, what your skin pigmentation takes you. Why does it seem that people have to be associated with somebody that they're not, with something that they're not associated with? If you go to Iraq, if you go to Saudi Arabia, Palestine, Jordan, going to the Sinai Peninsula, going into Egypt, North Africa, and all throughout North Africa, you're going to find the phenotype of this man in North Africa. For those saying that you're going to only find it in modern Egyptians, okay, yeah, more than likely. And for those saying, oh, it's going to show a genetic affinities, some genetic affinities with a little bit of Sub-Saharan African, okay, modern day Egyptians do have some Sub-Saharan African. But guess what? That Sub-Saharan African component increased when? After the Roman period. That's the facts, because this individual didn't have no East African or Sub-Saharan African components. They have no affinities to Sub-Saharan Africans. He had no affinities. So just be realistic about it. And then asking, where does his phenotype match up with anthropologically? I'll let you read it. This guy ain't gotta lie. The term Kemet, meaning black land, was used by the Egyptians to refer to their fertile land, often linked metaphorically to the skin tone of its inhabitants. Metaphorically. Right there. While ancient Egyptians shared strong affinities with Near Eastern populations, they also had some Sub-Saharan African ancestry, which increased in modern Egyptians compared to ancient ones, particularly in post-Roman periods. This indicates a diverse population. But guess what? This individual had no affiliation with Sub-Saharan Africans or East Africans. He was genetically North African and Mesopotamian. And a lot of that Mesopotamian DNA is Levantine and Anatolian. In summary, the phenotype you've created for the image, specifically with the dark to black skin pigmentation, would most closely match anthropological understanding of populations within ancient Egypt that had significant North African and or sub-Saharan African affinities, particularly those in the southern regions or within the broader spectrum of ancient Egyptian diversity. It reflects one plausible aspect of the rich phenotypic variation present in the ancient Egyptian population. And what did this individual have any affinities to East Africans or Sub-Saharan Africans? No, he did not. So this part right here would be taken out. It would just be significant North African. No significant affinities with Sub-Saharan Africa. I also did it here in ChatGPT. What does ChatGPT says? Basically the same thing, but this one says that phenotype shown aligns most strongly with Upper Nile Valley populations, especially ancient Upper Egyptians and Nubians, rather than with the lighter skinned populations of the Mediterranean coast or Lower Egypt. It reflects the indigenous African roots of early Nile Valley civilizations, something confirmed by archaeology, cranial studies, and increasingly by ancient DNA. There you go. Nobody has to lie. And it's saying the same thing right here. And this individual had no Sub-Saharan African admixture. He was not affiliated with Sub-Saharan Africans. Not at all. There's actually, I think he's a biomolecular geneticist or something like that. I think it's in this paper that he states that this is a foreigner. Let's go to it. Because remember earlier, it said that this individual grew up in Egypt. Let's read this quote right here. It is difficult to generalize the genetic origins of ancient Egyptians based on the analysis of a single sample's genome, particularly as it is possible that the individual whose results were obtained was a foreign visitor living in ancient Egypt during that period. Therefore, it is crucial for research to continue on more samples, mummified and non-mummified, to achieve a better assessment of the genetic origins of ancient Egyptians and their connection to factors of influence and interaction with all races in different parts of the world, he added. And this person is, I think it's Taha. Yeah, it's Dr. Tariq Taha, a genetics consultant and member of the scientific committee, the committee for the Egyptian Genome Project. So this guy is very important to the Egyptian Genome Project. Show y'all what this guy looked like right here. Because he's saying it's possibly a foreigner. Let me see something. I had him up. It's okay. Let me see something. There he goes. This is him. That's him right here. That's him. But the thing is, what he doesn't know is that it was proven that he was raised in Egypt. He wasn't brought to Egypt as a foreigner. He was born, he's more than likely born and raised in Egypt his whole life. So not a foreigner. But according to migrations and whatnot, his ancestry did come from Mesopotamia, from the Levant, Mesopotamia, Arabian Peninsula. You know, just like this proves his Y DNA more than likely his migration route that he took. So his ancestors would have been originally from EM215 going up EM35 in Egypt, going out into the Levant, P5 1818, going up by the time of the Natufian. I think that's post Natufian. Yeah, that's post Natufian culture. So look at all these different mutations that occurred in the same location. So one of his mutations right here, if I'm not mistaken, I think this is the one his specifically came from, was already in Saudi Arabia 11,000 BCE, and that right there, that mutation likely was a product of the Natufian culture and ended migrating into Saudi Arabia, going back up. This is important, y'all. Like, for those that haven't really focused on the S&Ps, this is important because it shows you that these people were going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, interacting with different people. You know, that's why chronology, I kept on saying it in the last video, chronology is so important because they would have experienced different crops, such as flax seeds. They would experience different animals, such as goats, lambs, sheep. They would experience different trees, I think palm trees, fig trees, maybe olives, grapes. They probably would have brought grapes from the West Asia up here coming down. They would have got grapes, because if I'm not mistaken, grapes originate somewhere around Turkey, Armenia area, and they were brought down. So I'm just saying, they would have been able to gather all of this stuff. And for those that never foraged or never grew anything in their lives, me personally, I forage a lot of wild fruits, such as blackberries, blueberries, a lot of local Florida fruits, plums. So what I do is I either do a cutting, or I take the seeds that I eat and keep them and plant them myself, because I like having local Florida fruit, like wild fruits. I like that stuff. So in those times, they more than likely did the same thing. So they found something, they liked it, they kept it with them as seed. I hope that makes sense. All right. I think I covered pretty much everything I wanted to cover in this video. I didn't want to make it too long. It's under an hour. I think that's good. That's pretty much the most important part I wanted to identify in this article, because I found it important, because he's wrong. This individual was pretty much, it was raised there, so he wasn't no foreigner. He was raised there in Egypt. Now, as far as his ancestors, when that occurred, well, they've mixed. Like the articles suggest that that could have been mixed a couple of times in his ancestors. It doesn't have to be recent. It could have been mixtures multiple times. So I don't know, but I mean, this just proves that they've been intermingling and traveling and migrating far longer than the pseudo community believes in. The fake wannabe Egyptians. Yeah, y'all are the ones claiming that the Egyptians came from the south, came from the Horn and whatnot, and went up, or some crazy nonsense. And it's not the case. And for those that are complaining really about this, let me tell you something. A majority of y'all don't even belong to E1B1B. That's what's mind-blowing to me, is majority of the ones that are trying to claim to be ancient Egyptians and whatnot, they have nothing, they are not affiliated with E1B1B, which we can tell from ancient times. It was in the land a long time ago in North Africa. Going to 33,000 BCE. And for those that are biblical believers, you got to understand, even this sample would have occurred, I think, even pre-flood, if I'm not mistaken. Because let me see something. What year did the flood of the Bible. So they're saying 1656. So let me see something. 1656, and I think the Hebrew year is 5786 or something like that. So yeah, this is roughly around the flood period, and obviously the flood didn't occur, right? But yeah, this is yes, something like that. This is like right after, yeah. So 45. So if the individual is 4,500, 4,500. So yeah, that's roughly around the same time. So yeah, so 4,300 to 4,500. This individual is dated to be 4,500 years ago. So yeah, proof there was no flood. I'm just saying for the biblical believers, no flood. That's why, and I didn't mention that in my last video, and I know I should have. But yeah, this proves your flood is a myth. You know, E1B1B was never wiped out. It was always migrating through the Fertile Crescent, which was also known for flooding. These people weren't wiped out. They were able to migrate through Mesopotamia, through the Fertile Crescent, and they survived, and they were able to produce, and they were able to bring their culture or beliefs or their practices, such as wheel pottery, and they were able to continue on. So, yeah, I think that wraps it up. I appreciate for those that watched the video. Thank you so much. Got any questions or comments? Please feel free to share politely, respectfully, and not ridiculously by posting a bunch of AI after AI after AI after AI comments. Like I said, this individual posted like 30 comments of AI. Complete nonsense. But hopefully you liked it. Please like, share, and subscribe if you enjoyed this content. And that is it. Thank you. Biblical DNA out.
When I look at biblical DNA, the DNA says you are the Father.